Have you ever left a meeting thinking everyone was on the same page, only to later realize that people walked away with completely different understandings? It's almost like everybody attended a different meeting. Or you felt frustrated when someone cut you off mid sentence, assuming they already knew what you were going to say. These are everyday workplace struggles, and they all point to one fundamental skill that's often overlooked: active listening. Today, we're going to dive into why active listening is a foundational practice that connects the four pillars of Agile: context, mindfulness, respect, and trust. When we listen to understand, not just to respond, we create conditions where shared understanding flourishes, collaboration thrives, and innovation takes root. So, these are all the essential active business agility practices that are needed in order to get us to a point where we can implement agile AI or anything else that requires that high speed in communications, understanding, creativity. So let's first talk about the active listening paradox. Let's call it that. Like many of the things in agile, there are things that, when we first hear about, they sound completely anti-intuitive. This is just nonsensical. This is crazy stuff, coming from Agile. And indeed, it's crazy stuff because it's a different way of looking at things, a different way of doing things. So the concept here of this paradox is that slowing down to actively listen accelerates the value of delivery. So you have to go slower in order to go faster. Doesn't make sense, I know. The point here is that there is a huge cost involved with misunderstanding. And that's what slows us down. When there is a misunderstanding, we have to rework things. We end up being frustrated. We make poor decisions. You have teams that put all of this energy, they invest, they go, 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 trying to do it fast, 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 only to realize that we've been running in the wrong direction. If we're going to launch a rocket, we better make sure that we have the degrees exactly as are needed when we're pointing that rocket. Otherwise, we're going to end up in the wrong galaxy after a while. It's the same thing. When we have misunderstandings early on, especially early on, but at any point, those take us off course. And sometimes we don't realize that we're off course until a long time has gone past. And then we have to unwind the tape. This becomes very expensive, very time consuming, and very frustrating because you don't reach that point of satisfaction that, oh, we completed, we achieved, we succeeded. No, so you have to go back and redo things or change them or fix things. Customers are unhappy. Stakeholders are dissatisfied, all kinds of fallout from having had a misunderstanding. So misunderstandings are very expensive. Whatever we can do to avoid them is eventually going to save us time. That's the point. And when we spend the time to slow down, have better communications, active listening helps us, then we can avoid those misunderstandings, which is going to make sure that we end up in a better place. Not a guarantee. There's always opportunity for misunderstanding, even if we've made the effort. And we're doing what we can to reduce the likelihood of ending up in the wrong place. Now, when we communicate, we usually think that we are listening to others. That's what we're thinking. That's our belief that we're listening to others. In reality, most of the time, what we're actually doing is we're filtering what they're saying. I've mentioned in other videos that there's this thing in our brain called the reticular activating system. This is a process that filters things from all of the information available in reality. If we were try to process it all, we would just go crazy. It's too much. So our brain filters things to what we call the conscious level, what we're consciously aware of. And that filtering is based on biases. It's beliefs, it's things that align with our way of thinking, whether it's correct or incorrect. These are the filters that we use, and they're assumptions many times, but they would use that in order to make sense of an otherwise incomprehensible amount of information that we couldn't process. So when we're listening to others, what we're actually doing is we're filtering things so that we can make sense of whatever it is that they're saying. If we speed through conversations because we think that we understand already, that becomes very inefficient. That creates a lot of miscommunications. And unfortunately, that's the way that our brain is wired to operate. We're fighting here two things. We're fighting habit of speeding up, quick, quick, quick. I need to get this done. Just tell me, give me the TLDR. Just let's get to the point. Which means that we're not really engaged in wanting to listen to more. We just simply want that TLDR so that we can get this activity done and over. There's that habit. And then on top of it, our biology aligns with that habit. Our biology in our brain, when we hear something, our brain immediately paints a picture based on probability of what's going to come next. So me just simply bringing up the word carrot, for some of you, might immediately put a context where there are rabbits involved in the conversation. And the reason why the brain has done this is, think if we didn't do that, if the brain didn't do that, we'd be on this constant cliffhanger. What's the next word? This doesn't make sense. I need the next word, the next word, the next word. It would be very frustrating trying to get to good conversations. Instead, what the brain is doing is it's creating a picture, a big picture of what the conversation is all about. And as we get additional pieces of information, it replaces its assumptions with the new piece of information to complete a better shape of that picture. But it's all based on mental stories. It's all based on the information that we have already in our brain. If we're introducing new information, we really need to be paying attention. Otherwise, we're just going to filter that out. We're not going to consider it. So this is how the brain works. It fills in the blanks while we don't have the information. And at any point, if you think of a timeline of a conversation, there are going to be moments that you don't have information. We need to be patient is the point. We need to take our time to give opportunity for all the information to surface and then look at the picture and figure out what's going on. Unfortunately, we're too impatient. And the way that we operate in business, the way that we're conditioned right now with the go, go, go and everything fast, 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 we don't take the time to slow down and allow that picture to form. So we end up going on our mental stories. That's what really happens. When we get interrupted by somebody mid-sentence because they're going on their mental story that they already had, they weren't listening to what we were saying. So active listening is really critical, going to the 4 pillars of Agile, to help us establish the context, proper context, because this is what allows us to have the same conversation, as opposed to I'm saying something and the conversation that you're having is based on whatever's in your biases and your assumptions. No, we need to create a shared context where we both are talking about the same thing. Active listening involves not just listening. I mean, that's part of it. If I'm trying to do too many things at the same time, and somewhere in the background there's this somebody person talking, well, that's already a compromise to having good conversations. However, it's not just about listening to the words. It's interpreting them. It's incorporating them into our way of thinking, and then it's acting on whatever it is that we've heard. So one piece of it is listening. So the words actually make it into our consciousness. And the other piece is processing them and echoing them back. So there's this echo back technique involved in active listening. And the echo back technique is not just about parroting the words that we heard. I mean, that would confirm that at least we were listening, but it doesn't confirm that we processed the words. What we do in echoing back is we restate in our own words and our own context, our own what makes sense to us, what we think that we heard. And we do that to confirm understanding. So when we rephrase whatever we heard from our perspective, it gives opportunity for the other person to listen to it slightly differently from how they said it, and then go, yeah, that like you said, that's it, that's it. Okay. Or say, no, hold on a minute. No, no, no. There's a point here that's slightly different. Another aspect of active listening that helps us is, as I said, it's not just about listening to words, it's about going deeper in what's being said and how it's being said. So we want to listen for emotion. We want to listen for concerns and unspoken needs. Those can come in many different forms. It can be either subtext to what's being said, maybe the word choice, and particularly how it's being communicated. So there's a lot of nonverbal communications going on. Now, some of you may have studied about this, and you know that there's some controversy about the nonverbal communications. There's been a lot of misinterpretation on the studies that have been done. This is all based on a study from Albert. I apologize, I'll bastardize the name, but I think it's something like Mehrabine, something like that. His studies from 1960s, where he cited that there's this, in addition to the words that we're saying, there's a lot of other things that convey feelings, attitudes, and words only account for 77% of that communication. Only 7%. So the words themselves are only conveying 7% of the message. The tone of the voice, 38%, and the facial expressions, 55%. So you can tell a lot by just looking at someone, even if we're not hearing the words. Now, again, these statistics, there's some interpretation about them, and they're not universal, and there's a lot of caveats to it. But whatever the exact statistics may be for a particular situation, what's important to note here is that words alone are not enough in the communication. There is something else going on. Think about it very practically. I'm sure that you've been in meetings when you've had a conversation and everybody came to an agreement, and you walk out, you get together with somebody, and you say, yeah, they're not buying it. No, they're not on board. How did you know that? It wasn't the words. Everybody said, yes, 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 let's do this. Yes, let's move forward. And you know. Why? Well, because maybe somebody, when they were saying, oh, sure, that sounds great. Yeah, right. Not really. Okay. Or they made a facial expression that didn't look at us in the eyes. There's a number of things that we pick up on. And that is what we're missing when we're not engaging in true active listening. Active listening includes going into another aspect of the actual culture that brings all of this together. We're talking about mindfulness, how mindfulness is the space that we need to be in order to really hear what's being said, not just listening to the words, but understanding the subtext. This present moment awareness improves our listening. It gives us the ability to dig deeper. If you remember from the video that I did on mindfulness, there's all of this information the reticular activating system filters out, and it's mindfulness that allows us to go deeper and deeper and access more of that information. Well, that's exactly what we need. We need to go deeper into what's being communicated and how it's being communicated so that we get to the subtext, so that we get to the full communication that's happening, not just the words. How do we know that we are not in that space? A telltale sign. As somebody's speaking, in our minds, we're preoccupied figuring out how we're going to respond. The moment that we catch ourselves doing that, we're not in a mindful space. And when that happens, we're going to miss something. We're potentially going to miss a critical word that's going to make the whole difference in the communication. You could have a conversation with your teams when you're saying that we're not going to have layoffs, and you continue talking blah, 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 blah. And if somebody came into the meeting already preconditioned that, oh, this is going to be a talk about layoffs, this is very serious, and they miss the nut because in their minds they were thinking about other things, yeah, they're going to hear everything that you say in context of we're going to have layoffs. Just one word can give you a 180-degree difference in the conversation that you're having. So this is really critical to be present at the moment when we're having the conversations, to really listen to what people are saying and not miss out and not allow our brains to fill in the gaps of information that we have. That's what allows us to read in between the lines by noticing the tone, the pauses, the body language. In Agile coaching, one of the things that we do very actively is engaging in high degree of mindfulness, precisely for this reason. Because when we're sitting through those meetings and we're listening to everybody, we're not just listening to the words. The words are secondary. It's more of the dynamics that are going on. And these are the elements that are part of the dynamics. And we see them because we are in this mindful state that allows us to go deeper into what's actually happening in that meeting. So there are a lot of mindfulness techniques that strengthen active listening in real time. This is one of the tools that we leverage to help us improve on our active listening. Now, when we put that effort, this takes effort. It's not just about sitting there and passively allowing words to go through our ears and brain and coming up with something. There's an effort that we need to make. And that effort is appreciated. It's a demonstration of respect. It's saying that what you're saying is important. It's important enough for me to put effort into it, to process it, not just at the highest level of the words themselves, but in the meaning and the entire all of the aspects of the conversation that we're having. So this gives us a quality of attention that we're communicating when we're active listening, which is far more important than just catching words. This allows us to get deeper in and have better conversations with people. There's a silent killer to all of this, which is we call it the triple D, the digital distraction devices. These really have a huge impact on the workplace. When people are in meetings or one-on-one conversations, and all that they're doing is they're staring at the phones or looking at the DMs on the laptop or whatever, yeah, that creates a huge opportunity to miss that one word. You miss the not, and now the entire conversation was about layoffs. No, it wasn't. It was exactly the opposite. But because we weren't engaged, we weren't being mindful, this is why we end up with the wrong conversation. And that's a form of disrespect. We're not respecting the speaker enough to be engaged in the conversation. We're having these separate, really disjointed conversations. So active listening really helps when we engage in it sincerely to convey, to establish that context, to strengthen our mindfulness and demonstrate that we're mindful, which is a communication of respect. And it also helps us create more inclusive teams because when we are engaging in active listening, we are as aware of what we're saying, communicating to others, as what others are communicating to us. We are aware of who's engaged, who's not. It gives us the opportunity because we are aware. Oh, hey, I haven't listened from you. I'm really curious to find out what you think about this that we're talking about. Or can you tell us if add something to it, engage them in some way, invite them to participate. We can only do that if we're aware that they're not engaged in the first place. This again communicates real respect because we have an appreciation for others. I mentioned along that we we engage in communication. We think that we're good at it, and we think that we're actually communicating. We think that we're listening when we're actually filtering. We think that we know what the person is going to say. No, we're actually filling in with our mental stories. There's all of these assumptions in communications. Communication is difficult. It's difficult to have good communications with others. We take it for granted because we do it all the time. We're talking all the time. But that just because we're talking all the time since we're babies doesn't mean that we are effective at our communications. There's a big difference. And the sad truth is that the majority of us, we're not very good at it. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of practice to become good communicators. And on top of it, there are cultural differences that we need to take in mind. When we're working in distributed worldwide teams, this introduces a lot of really complex challenges because different cultures look at things differently and they have different assumptions and they have different norms and different expectations. There's an entire book about this, and I'll do a talk about it at one point. But just as a very simple example, in the United States, there is a priority bias to efficient communications. And as part of that, there is an assumption, cultural assumption, a social assumption that when we come to somebody and we're going to communicate whatever idea, whatever concept we want to share with them, we've done our homework, we've done our work, and we've reached a conclusion. So just give me the TLDR, just tell me what that is. And then we can have a conversation around that. That is the expectation in the United States. In some European cultures, that doesn't work. And in fact, it's viewed as disrespectful if we just start off with these are the bottom lines of what I've looked at and what I see. Because we're not providing any evidence, we're not providing any backup to the information that we're communicating. To somebody in those cultures, our efficiency is actually perceived as disrespect. We need to be mindful of that. Just as the converse is true. Somebody coming to us in the United States with all of this detailed information is like, you're wasting my time. Just get to the point, please. So hopefully you can see how cultural differences are a setup that introduce yet another layer of challenge to have good communications. Engaging in active listening includes this mindfulness of who we're talking to, not just what we're saying, how we're saying it, but also to whom we're saying it, who's hearing what we're saying. And that gives us opportunity to modulate what we're saying, recognizing that different people in the room are going to hear it differently. So we might provide context as to, for the sake of keeping in mind that we have different from multiple cultures and multiple perspectives, I'm going to start off by giving you the summary of what we have. If we need to, we can go into the details behind it if anybody feels that you need it. There's a recognition in there that people will need more information without requiring sharing it at the expense of others not wanting to hear it. So it's a balancing act. It gets really tricky. But at least if we're aware of it, we're mindful of it, and we are open about it, then we can together decide what to discuss and what not to discuss. All of this takes time, takes effort, as I said, and it is a demonstration that we are serious in our communications, that we value our communications, and that we're willing to work to have good communications to avoid the misunderstandings. Because from a business perspective, this is not just a touchy-feely thing, or we want everybody to feel good. No, there's a real business cost when we don't do it. As I said at the beginning, we end up with the incorrect understanding. We march fast, 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 and we find out that we landed in the wrong place. We don't want that. So there's a business interest in engaging and making the effort. When we do that, it also communicates that we're trustworthy. It increases the trust in us because we are demonstrating that we are willing to establish proper context so that we have good communications, that we are mindfully working through those communications, and that in so doing so, we're being respectful of each other. That feeds trust. When we have that trust, that fuels having better communications. So we're doing our part to earn that trust through consistent active listening that demonstrates that we can communicate well with others. And when we do that, we avoid a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of escalation. Somebody who does that, yeah, we're going to trust them. Somebody who we just barely have said a few words and immediately cutting us off, we don't trust that. And unfortunately, there's a pandemic of that. With all the bullying that happens at all levels of companies and countries and everything, there's just, you can't trust that because there is no psychological safety to have a conversation, to make sure that we communicate well. And there's the risk that we're going to be shut down in 2 seconds without giving opportunity to speak, which says, I don't care what you have to say. That's not the way to establish a good foundation. Um, when we make ourselves vulnerable, when we express everything that's going through our mind in an open way, we have that established that psychological safety, then people notice that and they can see that they can trust that a lot more than somebody who is just protecting and shielding. So active listening can be a really powerful tool to nurture relationships, to avoid escalations, and to help us get to the goal of having good, clear communications, good shared understanding of what it is that we need to do. So there are things that we can do on a day-to-day basis that help us develop active listening. And where AI is concerned, first, we need to evaluate, is this even necessary where AI is concerned? Do we need to make the effort with AI? And the simple answer is yes. And let's look at it from two different perspectives. One of them is all of the meetings that we need to have surrounding AI. Well, that is a definite yes, we need to have them. And this is conversations with other people. The more mindful we are, the more we engage in active listening, and we ensure that we're having clear communications, the less the likelihood that we're going to build the wrong thing, or the wrong thing being something that doesn't meet needs, or it's something that potentially dangerous. So it's really important to engage in active listening to avoid incorrect or dangerous implementations. and also when we're working with the AIs themselves. Because the AIs, just like humans, they also fill in gaps. They're based on a statistical probability of what we're going to say next. And if we just go from prompt to prompt to prompt without checking, we could also end up in the wrong place with AIs. I do it all the time. I have a check-in that helps validate that the conversations that I'm having with the AI are indeed aligned and we're both avoiding assumptions. And it happens very often that the AI clarifies, oh, yes, yes, I see that changes the parameter, and then we can go this other direction. If we don't do that, it's very easy to create our own personal echo chamber. We're just going bouncing back and forth with the AI, and there really isn't a shared understanding of what it is that we're talking about. Understanding is a loose word when we're talking about AI, but at least it's being having the same context. It's very easy to get off context and just have an echo chamber that's reinforcing whatever it's coming out of us. But at that moment, the AI becomes less useful because it's just really just parroting back what we're putting out to it, and that diminishes the benefit. So we want to make sure in our communications about AI that we have diverse voices that are contributing to the strategy that we're developing. That can only come if we have that active listening. We want to avoid biased decision making by deeply understanding our stakeholders' concerns and our customers' needs. That can only come from having those deep conversations, not just order taking, following whatever they want to implement, but really listening to what it is that they need, what it is they want, what's important to them. Even if, especially when they don't verbalize it explicitly, if we've engaged in active listening, we have a chance of avoiding the things that they don't want us to implement. So by capturing the nuanced user needs, the unspoken needs, we improve the AI design and ultimately its adoption. As we engage more and more in AI, we want to make sure that we don't allow it to replace the human connection, instead that it enhances it. And when we maintain this human-centered ways of communicating, we reinforce that. And AI can help us do that. It's very compatible with it. It's not incompatible. We can make it incompatible if we ignore it. But if you look at AI just like we do any other coworker, we will be able to get the benefit of these kind of practices. So another thing that we want to make sure is that we're always establishing feedback loops in our communications. Feedback loops through active listening are really powerful because they're really reinforcing the practice of always retrospecting on what we say. And that can be part of a daily practice that we use to help us reinforce active listening. For example, start meetings or at some point during the meeting with the echo back. And what you do is you have either a recap of things that you've been talking about in previous meetings, or at some point during the meeting, you break and you say, okay, I'd like to hear from somebody. Could you please summarize what we've been talking about for the past 30 minutes? That can be really powerful. Not only does it show who's been listening and who hasn't, but more importantly, it's not about putting people on the spot. It's about wanting to hear from them what it is that they have internalized. And through that echo back, we will get it. And we'll see their engagement and we'll see, yes, we are all in alignment, or no, we're actually off. If you make that part of your practice, that will help reinforce the importance of active listening, and it will encourage everybody to have that perspective, to build that perspective as we're having the conversations and practice active listening themselves. Another thing you can do is not directly related to active listening, but it also nurtures it and reinforces it, is encourage your AI teams to document and reflect on key takeaways. They've gone through meetings. There's been some decisions. Have a little log. It doesn't have to be a big document. It's not about documentation. It's about just having a log somewhere. And any takeaways, any big decisions, anything meaningful that's happened as part of the conversations. Keep that and then think about that. That's the important piece, to think about it. So we've reached the point of understanding, we've recorded it, and we've thought about it. If you make that a practice, that mirrors what we're doing in active listening. When we acquire a piece of information, we reflect on it, and then we retrospect on it, we talk about it. So this is a mechanism that can really reinforce this practice. Another thing that you want to do is embed active listening as a core competency in leadership and AI and agile teams. You want to make sure that this active listening is viewed as a skill, a good skill for people to develop, and a useful skill that is going to help you come to better decisions as a group, individually, as a company, at all levels. So I'm really curious if you've had any, if you'd heard about active listening, or is this the first time that you're hearing about it? And did you realize that it included all of these elements? Maybe you've used it successfully. Maybe you've struggled with it. You've had challenges. I'd really love to hear about it and see what your experiences are. So drop a comment and let us know. And if you'd like to learn more about the four pillars of Agile, click one of these. I'll be happy to tell you all about it.